Hey everyone, Matt Brunig here. I had a piece that I published last week. It was titled, Over 20% of People Lacked Health Insurance Between 2017 and 2020. Very creative title. Subtitled here is Point-in-Time Measures Obscure Just How Common Health Uninsurance Is. It was cross-posted over at Jacobin Magazine. Big get for me. And I wanted to kind of do a data tutorial on this, not a full-blown data tutorial, but walk you through how I did this, because this is something I've been trying to do for quite a while with this particular survey instrument, and I've had a really hard time doing it. I just tried again. I just sort of forced myself again to take a stab at it and learn how to do it. And the main reason I did that is not actually because I wanted to answer this question, but because I wanted to use this survey's wealth data for another project I'm working on. And so my thought process was, let's do something that's quite difficult with this data, like the hardest thing I could kind of think of to do with it. And then when I step back and use the data for the easier wealth question that I want to ask, it'll just be a lot easier, like a resistance training kind of concept. So what I wanted to do here, as I explain in this first paragraph here, is I wanted to provide a different way of measuring how many people are uninsured. So the way this is typically done is you use a point-in-time measurement where you report what percent of the population is insured at any given moment. So the current population survey, the census using the CPS, they put out a point-in-time measure. I think Gallup puts out a point-in-time measure. I think they do it once each quarter. And there are other surveys, and the idea is to pinpoint a specific moment in time. You say, in this particular moment, how many people lack insurance? And that's fine. That's not a useless number by any stretch of the imagination. But I think it can often lead people astray when thinking about how common it is for people to experience uninsurance, right? Because you could have maybe a small number of people, a small percentage of the population who's uninsured at any given time. But if people are churning in and out of that status over and over again, then the percent of the population that actually experiences uninsurance is way higher than these point-in-time measurements would maybe have you believe. So if you want to try to answer that question, what you need is a survey that doesn't just ask someone one time, hey, are you insured this month? And then they're gone. Or maybe, hey, were you insured this year? And then they're gone. You have to have a survey that follows someone for a long period of time. And that's called a longitudinal survey. Sometimes it's called a panel survey. And the survey of income and program participation is the kind of, it's the census's sort of official longitudinal survey, if you will. I mean, they have a number of them, but this is kind of, I almost think of it as it's kind of like the current population survey or the American Community Survey, in that it has a similar universe of questions, but they track people for long periods of time. And I've been trying to use this for a long time, and back in the day, the last SIPP that I knew of was one that ended in 2014, but apparently over the past 4 years, they've done a new SIPP, and I actually found the new SIPP was slightly better organized, a little bit easier to use, and also I think my skills have gotten better. But anyways, this new SIPP is tracking people for 4 years. So they'll have a panel that they interview in 2017, right? And they'll interview them again in 2018, and they'll interview them again in 2019, and they'll interview them again in 2020. And during those interviews, they ask them about all 12 months, right? So they'll say, in January, were you insured? For some of the questions, not all the questions. Some of the questions are annual questions, but some of the questions are monthly questions. So in December 2017, they get you up on the phone. You're a participant in the survey, and they say, hey, man, were you insured in January? Yes or no? Were you insured in February? Yes or no? Were you insured in March? Yes or no? And they'll do that for all 12 months, and then they'll do that for all 4 years. So you get 48 months of consecutive data following the same person and group of people who are in the panel. You get that all laid out for you. And with that data, what you can do is what we see here in this graph, okay? So the black line is the point in time measure. So on any of these 48 months, if you were just to say, hey, are you insured, yes or no? And then you were to get the percentage, you would find that around, it kind of dips a little bit here, but then it stabilizes around, 7-8% of the population at any given moment, according to this survey, do not have health insurance. But the red line allows us to see how many people either lack health insurance in the current month or lacked health insurance in a prior month, right? So it's a cumulative measure. How many people, as we're walking through these 48 months, what percent of the people have been uninsured for at least 1 month, whether it's the current month or one of the earlier months in the survey? And as you can see, it just goes up and up and up and up. And by the end of the 48 months for this particular panel, 21% of people have been uninsured at some point for at least a month during these 48 months. And you can, what's kind of neat about this is you can kind of cut this for each year if you want, right? So across 1 year, you can say that, around 14% of people were uninsured. Across 2 years, you can say around 16% of people were uninsured at some point. Across 3 years, you could say about 19% of people were uninsured at one point. And across 4 years, 21% of people were uninsured. Now, 4 years, that's as far as they're going to go with this. But, you could imagine, you could see the trend here. If you were to project it out a little bit more, it would continue to go up. And you notice it kind of flattens out after a while because, once someone has entered that status, if they re-enter that status, it doesn't bump the red line up anymore because they've already been counted in the red line. So you can see there's a big gap, right, between saying 7% of people are unemployed or uninsured and saying that 21% of people experienced uninsurance at some point in the last 4 years. And I do the same thing for non-elderly adults. And it's higher. We get up to 27% for non-elderly adults, so 1 in 4. That's a population people focus on a lot because, of course, elderly adults, they're almost all on Medicare. Children, there are uninsured children, but CHIP and Medicaid and those kind of go a long way for children. Non-elderly adults, we are really still kind of left out in the cold disproportionately. And over 1 in 4 of them were uninsured in the last 4 years. And then I also wanted to show this with Medicaid. I got the idea when I was doing this. Let's also focus on Medicaid because I hear so often people say things like, oh, well, this bill, like single payer, Medicare for all, back when we were having that debate, it's really of no use to people who are on Medicaid because they've already got insurance. And, to the extent that it raises taxes, it might actually require them to pay more tax. So they don't get more insurance because they're already insured, and then they pay more tax, and so they're actually worse off, right? And at the time, I try to emphasize over and over again, this is not really true because being on Medicaid is not like a permanent thing. People come off of Medicaid, and when they come off of Medicaid, they often come off into uninsurance. They might come off into private insurance, right? These populations are not static. And so we see here, in this graph, I only isolated the people who were on Medicaid in January of 2017. So that's the first of the 48 months. And then we just followed those people who are on Medicaid in January of 2017, just follow them over the 48 months. And what we see here is by the end of 48 months, over 14% of them have had a spell of uninsurance. And I'm sure you notice that 14% is actually very similar to this number here. And so I'm sure if you were to keep pushing this out to year 5 and year 6, it would continue to go up, right? The only reason it's sort of somewhat lower, I think, in its final number here is because for the first year, you didn't get to see them going into uninsurance. You know what I mean? Anyways, I put this out there and I kind of pointed out on Twitter when I was sharing this, like, oh my God, I finally cracked the code on how to do this. Obviously, people have been using this survey for a while, though it does have a reputation for being extremely difficult to use. And I have tried in the past. I've only one other time managed to use it for a cross-sectional thing, so not using its longitudinal features. But now I think I have a good starting point on how to use it. And so many people were saying, make a video, make a video, make a video. In part, I think because, if you're interested in these topics, you probably know about SIPP and you probably know that it's really difficult to use. I'm a little bit shy about making this video only because in producing this, the other stuff I've shown you, I've been doing that stuff for years and years and years. And as anyone knows, when you start something new, you might figure out how to do it, like how to actually make it work. But that doesn't mean that you figured out the optimal way to do it. You know what I mean? You kind of maybe hack together something that is really inefficient, but it gets the job done. And then over time, this is how my experience has been. You refine, you refine, you refine. In fact, this morning I was thinking about this code. Actually, when I was going to bed last night, I was thinking about this code that I wrote to produce this. And I was thinking one of the loops I used in my mind, I don't know why I was cogitating over this as I was going to bed. One of the loops I used in my mind, I was like, oh, I could actually have skipped that particular loop. That would have saved me some time. So over time, I hope to get more efficient with this. But the other thing is that it's actually just kind of difficult to be efficient with it because the data set is massive. It's like 15 gigs to follow. The data set that you need, all the data you need to follow these people for 4 years, it's like 15 gigs of data. It's like 2.6 million lines, and it's a massive number of variables. I think I calculated that if you multiply the number of lines by the number of variables, it's like 13.3 billion data points in the whole survey, spanning 4 different files whose collective size is like 15 gigs. It's also just big, and that might be hard to overcome as well. So all that is just to kind of give you a precaution. I'm not telling you to do it this way. I'm just showing you that this is how I was able to do this. And then maybe, you can go from there. And also I'm not going to do a whole lot of in-depth, like look at my code stuff. I'm mostly going to like explain in the abstract how to do this, like generally using the data dictionaries and the user guides and showing you kind of how I pieced it together. Okay. So enough of that bloviating. Here is the website for this SIPP on the census website, census.gov/all this. And as you notice, you can access SIPP data by year for the last 4 years. Or I guess, yes, 4 years, 18, 19, 20, and 21. You can access it by year for the last 4 years, or you can access it by panel/wave for the prior versions of it. This panel wave stuff, the way it was organized in the past, that was the shit that just really had me gone. Because in these years, what they do, they interview people once per year. And they ask them questions for, the prior 12 months. Before, they were interviewing people like every 4 months. And then you also had overlap for the months that people were being interviewed. So it wasn't like always the same 4 months. It was a nightmare for me to like try to put it all together. This stuff is a little bit cleaner to use. But so let's just hop into it. Like what I used was the 2018 panel. So that's and these years, by the way, are a little bit confusing if you know the way the census does it. The years are like kind of off by one. So the 2018 SIPP, that I think the 2018 I think refers to like the release date of it, but it covers year 2017. And the 2019 SIPP covers the year 2018. And the 2020 SIPP covers the year, you see what I'm saying? It's all 1 year back, but there's 4 years here. So I wanted to follow the 2018 panel, which goes from Jan 2017 to December 2020, all 48 months. And you might think, oh, cool, just click on the 2018 thing and there'll be like some document where it's all compiled and you can just follow that panel. No, No, actually. Instead, what you have to do is each one of these files will contain all the panels that are being interviewed in that year. So the 2018 panel, it starts in 2018, meaning the 2018 file just has the people who were interviewed that year, because that's the first year they started the whole new kind of wave of doing it, okay? Then in 2019, you get both the people who they're continuing to interview from the prior panel or the prior year and the new panel. So they see the whole new panel that starts in 2019. And then in 2020, you get 3 of them. You actually don't, because they gave up on the 2019 one. But in 2021, you do get 3 of them. So in 2021, this 2021 file, which I'll click through here, this 2021 file contains records of the people who first got in the survey in 2018, people who first got in the survey in 2020, and the new people who just got in 2021. It contains all of those people. So that means you've got to distinguish when you're doing the coding between each year. You got to only pull out the people who are from the panel that you're interested in. For me, I'm interested in the 2018 panel. So in each one of these files, and I had to download all of them, right? In each one of these files, I had to go through and, as part of kind of coding it, make sure I'm only tracking people who are in the 2018 panel. Right? So I've got to use a variable to isolate those people and ignore everyone else. And I got to do it for all 4 files. I got to walk through all 4 of them. So, that's difficult, but it's not as difficult as this shit was. So, you download those 4 files, and then off you are to start. Now, so let's look at the user's guide here, because that actually helps a little bit. Now, part of the thing that's a little bit intimidating here is the documentation on this. It's vast, but it's extremely long. I mean, the user guide is 181 pages, and you might be thinking, oh, that also includes like the data dictionary. That also includes all the variables in the file, right? All the questions and all the answers. No. For the data dictionary, you got to go down here. Okay, and look how big this thing is. The PDF that contains the data dictionary, and the data dictionary is just every question that was asked, all the possible answers, all that kind of stuff. The PDF file that contains the data dictionary, look how it's even struggling to load. Here we go. Is 3,000, look up here, I know it's small, 3,389 pages. They do have a nice little table of contents here that will help you jump around. 3,000 pages just for the data dictionary. Now, part of this is because they put each variable on its own page. But even still, that's 3,000 pages, Okay, so let's go into the user guide. This will help explain what I was talking about with the panels. So here's the survey organization. As they note here, they're basically organized into panels and waves. Now for 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, the waves are just each year, right? So 2018 is wave number 1, if you will, at least for that, And then 2019 is wave number 2. For the 2018 panel, and then 2020 is wave number 3, and then 2021 is wave number 4. That's just, they interview them 4 times across 4 years, right? The 2018 panel are the people who are initially onboarded in the 2018 SIPP, and they follow them. You see, they follow this panel through all 4 of these years, right? Now, they were obviously, when they're wanting to do this, they initially were just going to kind of have this overlapping setup where each panel, you start a new panel each year, you follow them for 4 years, and then they're gone, right? And we'll just kind of do it, just sort of this infinite overlapping kind of thing here. That's the idea. In 2019, they abandoned that. They explain why up here somewhere. It's not really important, but they abandoned the 2019. So the 2019 panel, you only got 1 year of them. They were going to do them for 2020, 2021, and 2020. You don't get that for them. But then they restarted it here, and we get these 4-year panels again. So like I was saying, when you get to the 2019 file actually includes responses from both the 2018 panel, right, the people who are onboarded here, and the people and the 2019 panel, the people who are onboarded here. For 2020, you got responses from people from the 2018 panel, again, the people onboarded here who they're following and interviewing every year, and you got responses from the 2020 panel, the people who are onboarded right here. And then for 2021, you get responses from 3 panels, all in the same file. And you got to cut that all up. Make sure, for my purposes, I'm only wanting to follow the 2018 panel. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So how do we do this? So the initial question is going to be, okay, so part of the things that is a problem with this is there's 48 months. So immediately think, okay, great. So there's 48 months for the 2018 panel. There's 48 months of data, right? Based on the way they set it up. Each person has 48 lines of data spread across 4 files. And so it seems like, okay, great. So just track each person across all 48 months, somehow. And in each 48 months, you want to register were they insured or uninsured, right? You want to store that somehow. And then you want to kind of go back and figure out how many people were uninsured in a given month, and then how many people were cumulatively uninsured at each month in the 48-month period, right? That's sort of how you're thinking. Now, the problem immediately is you think, oh, that's very easy, except that as much as they try, they don't actually, they're not actually able to contact the same people every year for 4 years. They try, but some of them fall out of the survey, right? Some of them, they just disappear and they can't get in touch with them again. This is called attrition. So the challenge becomes, okay, shit, so not only do I need to follow every person, not only do I need to follow every person who got into the file on January 2017, and I need to follow them all the way to December 2020, but I also need to make sure that anyone who dropped out somewhere in the interim, I need to make sure that I don't count them because they're going to throw shit off. So I need to go through the panel and only isolate people who were in all 48 months, it would seem like, okay? You could do that. Don't get me wrong, you could do that, but now so the first things first is I've got to isolate all these people. And then there's a question of what weight do I give them? Remember, when you're doing survey data and you're computing this, you have to use these survey weights. So how do I weight people across 48 months while accounting for attrition? Because not everyone is there the whole, I want to get something that represents the population, so what do I, and thankfully there's an easy answer to this. Okay, they make it very easy for you. So what you do here, if you want to find all the people who were in the survey for all 48 months, and you want to be able to isolate them, go down here, right here, longitudinal weights for 4-year cohorts. These are the longitudinal weights for the cohorts of respondents who have data in the 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 SIPP data files, right? So they give you a weight for the people who were there for all 48 months, or at least for all 4 years. I think technically some of them might not have all their data in the first year, but they have some answers in the first year, and so they're still counted. And so this is a 5th file that you have to download. It just contains these longitudinal weights, right? And what you're going to do here is notice this is the 4-year longitudinal weight. Now notice they actually wrote 3-year here, but that's a mistake, as you can see, because here's the 2-year weight, which is fin year 2. Here's the 3-year wait, which is fin year 3. And then here's the 4-year wait, because it's fin year 4, right? These can't both be the 3-year wait. So obvious typo here. This is the variable for the 4-year wait. So you're going to download this file right here, however you do it. I actually did the pipe delimited one. You're going to download this file here, and it's just going to contain these variables. And what you can do is, if you combine the S panel with the SSUID and the PNUM, you can get a unique identifier for each person in the file, right? So the SSUID is basically like an initial household. So each household gets their own number, roughly speaking. And then the person number is the number of the person in the household. So within each SSUID, you have person number 1, person number 2, person number 3, person number 4, right? Within each household. And then S panel is the panel year. So we're only looking for 2018, right? Because that's the year that that's the panel we're following, right? So the S panel will say 2018. And then the SSUID will be basically a household number, and then the PNUM will be a person number within the household. So you combine those three things together, you get a unique identifier for a person, and then you also get their 4-year longitudinal wait. And so what you can essentially do is you can take this file and you can just make a list of each person using their unique identifier. And again, the unique identifier is the combination of these three variables. So I think what I did was I did S panel dash SSUID dash PNUM. And then the combination of all that string that comes out the end of it, that's their personal identifier. And so the first thing you want to do is just create a list of all those people, right? Because then you can use that list later on, and you already know the people who were in there for all 48 months. Because this file tells you essentially, here are the people who were in it for all 48 months. And it gives you their weight. And this weight is set up in a way to account for attrition and do all this kind of shit, like to make it representative, and like it cleans up all the mess of a longitudinal survey for you. So that's the first thing you got to do. Get this list of all the unique identifiers of all the people who went the full 4 years, and also associate each person in the list with their weight. So that later on, when you get other lists of, for instance, the list of everyone who was uninsured in January 2017, you can also just make a list of that with their unique identifier. Then you can immediately move straight to the weight, right? Okay. Yeah, I think that's basically what we can learn here. So again, what you're going to do, download all 4 files, 2018, 19, 20, and 21. Okay? And then what are we going to do? All right, so then we got it here. Here are the files, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and then here are the longitudinal weights, which is a whole other file, okay? And again, I want to caution, this is trash. What I'm about to show you is trash. It works, but I'm not endorsing this as a way to do anything, okay? Running this program takes like 8 minutes to produce the output. Like I said, but this I think is useful, honestly, because, you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere. When you're trying to learn something new, just dive in, figure out something that works. Because if you can get a foothold into something that works and get your mind around something that actually works, right? Code that actually executes and produces the output that you want it to produce. Get that first foot forward, and then you can fix and optimize. And every other time you do it, make little changes to make it better, right? If you focus too much on getting that code perfect the first time you ever do something new, you're not going to get it done. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to waste your time. So I say just jump on in, okay? So all I do here is the first things first. I just read all 5 of these files into an array. using the read lines, what do you call this? Method? Is that what they call it? And so we just have a list basically of every line in the in this file, the weights file, and then every line in the 2018 file, and then every line in the 2019 file, and whatever. And if you've seen my other ones, my other videos, you'll know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through every line using for loops. That's how I'm going to do it. Should I be using pandas? Of course, obviously, yes. But I'm not. And I don't know necessarily. One of the things I like about coding this way is the loop is very brute, but it's also very intuitive, and you can kind of do whatever you want to do, right? I don't actually know how you would follow someone across 48 months spread across 4 different years and 4 different files in pandas or R. I don't know how you actually like follow someone longitudinally. I know how to do cross-sectional stuff. I don't know how to do longitudinal stuff. Obviously, there must be a way to do it. But instead of having to go out and learn like the specific way that you use the pandas dictionary or pandas module or whatever the fuck they call it, library, figure out the way that they want you to do it, you can just use the basic Python tools. If you know how to program and you can work out the code of how you would follow the same person with their unique identifier across 48 months across 4 files, you can figure that out like conceptually. And then if you just use the most plain generic ass like for loops and other like coding techniques, you can also just do it. And yeah, it's inefficient as hell, but it gets the job done. And it's not like a fucking web service. I'm just running the script on my computer every so often, All right. So the first thing I do here is I fill up the weights dictionary, or I fill up 2 files, or two kind of data constructs. I don't know. This one is a list, sometimes called an array in other languages, and this one is a dictionary. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through this file here, okay? And I'm going to isolate the SSUID, which is basically a household number, the PNUM, which is a person number within each household, and the SPanel, which is the year. And we're only looking for 2018, remember, right? And so what I then do is I create a unique identifier by doing SPanel, which is the year, then a dash, then the household number, which is the SSUID, then the person number, then a dash, and then the person number. So we wind up with this like 3 numbers that are connected with dashes, and that's like the unique identifier. And I just add all the unique identifiers to this list. And I create a dictionary where each unique identifier is the key and the value is their 4-year longitudinal weight. So it's each personal identifier essentially points to their value. And what this will allow me to do is later on, when I'm working with some of the PID is like personal ID. That's my little shorthand for it. Later on, when I'm working with these personal IDs with the other files, I can always just take those personal IDs and just pull up their longitudinal weight using this dictionary, right? So at the end of this little thing, all we've done is we've run through this little file. This is a tiny little file, the longitudinal file. I got a list of all the personal IDs in that file, and I got a dictionary that points each personal ID to their weight, okay? And I'm just setting up for later on, okay? From here, what I decide to do basically is I need to create a couple of lists for each month, right? There's 48 months. And for each month, I need to create a population list, and I need to create an uninsured list, right? So for January 1, it'll say 2018. For January of 2017, and this is again confusing because the years are always like lagged, we'll have a list that's basically identified as 2018-1, right? Which is the first month of the 2018 file. And then for February, it'll say 2018-2, and then 2018-3, and then 2018-4, all the way down until 2021-12, which is the last December of the last, right? So we'll wind up with those 48 lists, right? And really 96 lists. Because for each of those months, we're going to create a list that lists the population, right? So for January of 2017, we'll have a list of all of the personal IDs of the people who are in that month, right? All the personal IDs of people who are in that month. That's the population. And then we're going to create a list of all of the uninsured people who are in that month. So how do we find out if someone is uninsured? And for that, we're going to have to go into the data dictionary, this beast. And long story short, it's this variable. Oh geez, there we go. See this variable here? This is the name of the variable. Does this person have any health insurance, private or public, in the current month? If they answer no, they're uninsured. It's as simple as that, right? So, what we do, again, for each month, for all 48 months, we're going to create this little dictionary. And the dictionary will take as its key the month, which is 2018-1, 2018-2, 2018-3, right? We'll take the month as the key, and then we're just going to list the PIDs, the personal IDs of the population in that month. And then we're going to say, if this person is uninsured, then also add him to this second dictionary, which is the uninsured dictionary, right? So at the end of the day, we get this population dictionary, which consists of 48 lists. With each list, every PID of the person in that month, of the people in that month in that panel, right? And then we get a second dictionary, which is the uninsured dictionary. That dictionary consists of 48 lists, where each list has all the PIDs of all the uninsured people in that month. Yeah? You following me? Okay. And at the end of all that, we got all these lists. We got 96 lists basically, and if you count this one up here, I guess we technically have 97 or 98 lists. And we're going to use those lists later on. Now, notice I did this as a function, which I humorously called hasty function, because initially when I was writing this code, I only wrote it to do 2018, and that's because, like I said before, you gotta take little bites. Take off a bite you can handle. So first thing I did was, let's just do it for the first file, the 2018 file. And when I got the code written for the 2018 file, it was clear that I could just reuse that code for all the other files. And so I just made a function out of it, and then I just run that function for each file. You see what I'm saying? So I walk through all 4 files in order to create these dictionaries that have in each of them 48 lists, with each list corresponding to a month. Got me? Okay. This is crazy. This is like completely insane. Like I said, I don't know how to do that. I'm self-taught on all this, by the way. But, you know, I'm in the process of self-teaching myself this. So from here, what I do is I got to go walk through the lists. I created the 48 lists, right, which is the population in all 48 months. And then the uninsured in all 48 months. I got to walk through each list. Okay? So what I do is I say for P in population K, where K is going to be the month. So I'm going to have to walk through. This thing is going to run 48 times because I have to run it for each month, right? So when we go through the first month, we say 4P in January of 2017, right? I want you to create a weight counter, and I just want you to add their weight. And here we're collecting their weight from the PID weights dictionary that we created up here, right? That's their 4-year longitudinal weight. So what I'm just saying is, hey, for each month, go through your list of PIDs and just add up their 4-year longitudinal weight, right? If you add up their 4-year longitudinal weight, then at the end of this, whole thing here, this variable, pop weight, will contain the weights, the full weighted population of that month for the 2018 panel. Then we're going to do the same thing for uninsured. We're going to say, hey, for each month, I want you to go through the list of uninsured people. And I just want you to go add them up using their 4-year longitudinal weight, right? Then from there, right, we've already identified them as uninsured. We're also, in this process, we're creating an uninsured, a cumulative uninsured list, right? Because we need to not just identify who's insured in each month, but we also need to keep track of who has been uninsured in prior months, because that's the whole payoff to this, right? So what I say is, look, if this person is uninsured in this month, I want you to also check to see whether their PID is in the list of the people who are cumulatively uninsured, right? The people who has been uninsured at any time. And if they're not in that list, right, I create that list here. If they're not in that list, add them to it, right? I want you to add them to that list, okay? So from there, at each point, when we get to this part of the loop, the list of the cumulatively uninsured will be complete, right? Because we will have added to that list all the uninsured people from the current month. The list already had all the uninsured people from all the prior months. And then right here, we add any of the newly uninsured, the people who have never showed up as uninsured before, we add them to the list, right? So by the time we get here, the list for the cumulatively uninsured is correct, right? So I just say walk through that list, and just like you did here, add up all the weights, okay? And then we get down here to the bottom, and I say for each month, remember K is the month, right? K stands for key, but here it's the month, right? So for each month, I want you to print the population weight for that month. I want you to print the uninsured weight for that month. And I want you to print the cumulative uninsured weight for that month. And here I want you to print it with a separator, comma. And when you run this, I guess I should run it. I should have run it like an hour ago to get it going for you. When you run this, what'll happen is it'll output this comma separated value list that looks like this, like a little spreadsheet, and then you can use the spreadsheet to make the graph that I did. So I'm going to let that run. I don't know if it'll actually finish by the time the video's out. I don't want to keep you here for all of that, frankly. But yeah, that's the basic gist there, right? So, I mean, the key is understanding the longitudinal weight, because that's really a shortcut for identifying all the people who were there for all 4 years. And it's not just that one. So you can use other longitudinal weights here. That's the longitudinal weight for the 4-year cohort, the people who are in it for all 4 years. But then they also have longitudinal weights for the 3-year cohort. And this one is for 2019, 2020, and 2021, right? And then you can do the 2-year cohort for 2020 and 2021, right? So, here are the replicate weights. So these longitudinal weights, to me, were kind of the key to really make this a lot simpler than it used to be, in my mind. So maybe one thing we could do here to kill some time as that shit runs is look at this data dictionary, because there's a lot of cool stuff in here that I also want to probe and that could be of interest to people who watch this, right? So we've got the labor force variables here, and I've done some videos on unemployment before, but look at this subtopic, the unemployed subtopic. So they'll ask people, all sorts of questions about, are you unemployed or are you not unemployed? And if you are unemployed, why are you unemployed? And let's see how this all works. What is this? Unpaid family work. Oh, that's interesting. So did you know that you can work in a family business and not get paid? I guess you probably did know that, but that's the only place that's an exception to our minimum wage laws. Like if your family has like a family restaurant and you go work in it, you can also work your kid in it and not pay them. So that's an exception to the child labor laws. There might be some lower limit to that. But you're allowed to work in a family business without getting paid, without getting the minimum wage. And I've never seen a survey that actually tried to isolate people like that. I guess it would make sense that that's a population you would be interested in this survey, because this survey, to take a step back, the SIPP, as the name suggests, the Survey of Income and Program Participation. Program participation is welfare programs. This survey was initially created to better track people's participation in food stamps and Medicaid and AFDC when that existed, and SSI and all these kinds of things, right? It's a survey that's focused on the poor and focused on their participation in these programs, and that's one of the reasons why it's a longitudinal survey, because one of the interesting questions you might have is, for instance, how long, when people get on food stamps, how long do they stay on food stamps? How quickly do they get off? And as you saw here, I was able to do that with Medicaid. You're able to see people coming off of Medicaid. This is just people who are uninsured, but I could also just detect when people come off of Medicaid using the same kind of method, but with different variables. So what they do is they do an oversample of the poor, of lower income people, and then they reweight in order to still make it representative. They oversample the poor, and then they also ask all these program participation questions. So that's cool. I guess for unemployment, I probably want to go to here, right? Or is it this one? Employment status for week 1. Oh, that's interesting. So they have unemployment down to the week level. Let's see what that's all about. Sorry, I've not actually looked at all this stuff yet. Okay, great. So for each month, remember, there's data for each month. So for each month, they actually ask them whether they were employed in each week of the month. So in theory here, you have not 48 months of data. You have 48 months times 50 times what? You have 52 weeks times 4. You have 208 weeks of unemployment data that they're tracking these people. That's really interesting. But yeah, I guess this would be right here. This would be unemployed, right? No job / business. Or I guess you could do, I guess it would be all of these, right? Yeah. So you could go through each week for 4 straight years and add up how many people at some point, were absent without pay, were on layoff, looking for work, or not looking for work. I guess these 3 would be unemployed, right? Because you're either looking for work or you're on layoff or you still have a job, right? You could just isolate that and you could get 208 weeks of data following these people. It's very tempting. That's very. If you thought 48 months, if you thought 48 lists for each variable, let's do 208. Obviously, as far as coding goes, it's not going to be any more difficult, but in terms of computation time, I can only imagine. Wow, that's wild. Sorry, I had no idea that they were tracking unemployment on the week level. I've never seen that before. That will excite some of the people I know who watch my videos. Yeah, what else have we got here? Shit, look, they've got multiple jobs. You could, in theory, have 6 jobs. You could have 6 jobs in each week. Monthly earnings. I'm sure they have weekly earnings. Number of weeks with a job during the month, recode for monthly. So this is what I thought they were going to have. I thought it would just be like a monthly number, just like the uninsurance one was. Because this more closely tracks what you get from the unemployment data they typically publish with the CPS. So this is a monthly version of it. And yeah, with the job all month, absent from work. So you could, you could also do it for each month using this one. All right, let's check in on our, oh, there it is. There it is. There's our data. All right. For some reason, when I run this, it hangs. I don't know why that is, but it doesn't affect my ability to use it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump this in a file called output.csv, and then I can open that file in Excel or whatever. I'm not going to do that here because I've pasted it already into my Google spreadsheet. I'm not going to open that because I actually don't know how to get to that without opening up my entire Google Drive, which I don't know what all is on that, if I've got like some accounting information and all that shit. But yeah, with this data, as you can see, we got each month, right? So this is the first month, 2018-1, which remember is actually January 2017. And then 2018-2, which remember is February 2017. And so on and so forth, all the way down to 2021-12, which is actually December 2020. And then in the first value here, we got the population. Notice at first the population is a little bit lower for these first few months. This I was telling you because, you know, they may not have data on all of these people, but it's only like a few million lower. Once you get to month 12, however, the number is pretty well stabilized at 325 million all the rest of the way through, and that means that their longitudinal weight is good because that's approximately the population of the U.S. and so you're getting weights that go up to that population level. Value number 2 is the number of people who are uninsured that month. So you see we got 32 million. It looks like here. As we get down to here, we're getting to like 25 million. Right, and then we got the cumulatively uninsured after the last comma, right? And as you see, it starts out at 32 million. It starts out at the same number, right? Because in the first month, cumulatively uninsured and the uninsured that month are the same. And then this number just keeps climbing. Obviously, it can never go down. And by the end of the months, oh, I should probably move my head. Sorry. All right. By the end of all of the months here, the cumulatively uninsured is 66 million out of 325 million, which is how you get that 21% number. And yeah, so I just take that, throw that into Google Sheets, and this is how I make these graphs. So have at it, have fun, especially if you want to do 208 weeks of following people in unemployment, which I must tell you is very tempting to me at the moment. Let's see actually what some of these other programs while we're here. Fuck it, why not? Look at all this stuff they've got. They got annual programs. We got energy assistance, food assistance. It's also a good way to learn about the welfare state, frankly. I mean, you know, here they all are listed in this data dictionary, this 3,300 page data dictionary. But look, SSI, we got survivor payments, tax returns. What the fuck is that? I might check that out here in a second. Transportation assistance, training assistance. You know, we're talking niche shit. Niche shit. Reduced price school meals. I don't know. You know, they probably distinguish between whether you're paying the 30 cents or the 0 cents for your meals. Social Security child amounts. I've been trying to tell people that children sometimes get Social Security through the Survivor Benefits Program when I was trying to pitch my child allowance thing, and you had to explain that to people. Social Security on behalf of a child. That's you know what that is. That's my child allowance proposal. Social Security on behalf of a child. Yes, it already exists. The structure already exists. The SIPP knows about it. You can collect Social Security on behalf of a child. That's would be how my child benefit works. SSI, so lots of cool stuff here. What's tax returns? Did you file a tax return? Holy shit. I would like to know that answer. I would have liked to have known that question. That's interesting. Do you expect to file a tax return? Okay, dude. I'm just lit up about the fact that I know how to use this now. Like I said, the main thing I'm going to do next is I want to use the wealth variables because we don't usually get the normal wealth and asset variables come from the Survey of Consumer Finances, which is published every 3 years. Their sample size is like 6,000 people, which is quite large, but you can't break it out by state. There are limitations to that. The SIPP Wealth Survey is not as good in some sense as the Survey of Consumer Finance Wealth Survey, but it's massive. It's massive. And with the latest SIPP, you get a wealth survey every year, not every 3 years. So again, limitations, trade-offs, whatever. For the purposes I'm using it for, I'm going to be able to use these wealth variables very, very nicely. What have they got here? Do they have student debt in here? Probably, right? Debt, other debt. Other debt. Anyways, I'm not going to... I wonder if that would be an interesting video. Matt scrolls through the SIPP 3,000-page variable list and just pops off about how interesting it is to him. Probably not. So we will leave that for another day. I don't know. Pop off in the comments if you want me to do a whole video of me just going through 3,000 pages of SIPP variables and being like, wow, that's interesting. I'd love to do something with that. If that's the kind of sick shit you're into, let me know. Unsecured liabilities. Is this where student debt would be? What if I just control F student debt? How about that? What do I control F student? No, because then I'm going to, oh, here we go. Owed any money for student loans or educational expenses for the reference period. So this is just a yes, no, but do we then get an amount? Look, we've got medical debt. There's probably an amount somewhere, right? Let's see. I bet EDET, ED will show up in a universe. And then, yep. No. Will it show up in a universe and then we'll get a dollar amount somewhere? Oh, no. It looks like it's just a yes or no question. Well, that's still interesting. Okay. I said I was going to stop, so I'm going to stop. Here you go. Have fun. Go do some SIPP shit. Send it to me. Ask your questions. Those are always easy fodder for videos because then I don't have to think about the topic. You think about the topic and then I just fucking pop off. So I'll catch you later.